Hi, and welcome to Fawns & Porter's Essex Block of the Month with these lovely Quilting Treasures fabrics. I am your host, Jenny K. Parks. If you want to know more about me, you can check out Jenny K. Quilts on my website and YouTube channel. Today, we're going to talk about the star, and I mean that in many ways, the center star block, which is the star of our quilt, the medallion, the big one in the middle. And I have to tell you, I've gotten a lot of comments when I posted some pictures about this on Facebook, people really liking it and enjoying especially that center. This is where we need to be careful, very careful, and take everything that we've learned before and apply it to this, because it's going to be the center. That's going to be where everybody looks and what everybody pays attention to. But it's going to be great. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we need to make in our center star block are these corners here. You see a couple of the corners. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to make a half square triangle, little triangle squares. And if you have, let's see here I have these two colors, right? I've been marking on the cream, but just kind of to state the obvious. If you have two colors and one's lighter and one's dark, and sometimes the pattern direction will say, oh, take this one and mark it. But you know what? If it's a darker one, mark the lighter one. Just, you know, sometimes it's not one of those things you always think about all the time, but you need to. Okay, so to make this half square triangle, I'm going to take this guide here and line it up corner to corner and draw my little line. Like so. Whoop, right sides together. And I'm going to sew down either side. Now again, this is simple chain piecing. You've got several to make for this, so just sit down and make them all one after another. Turn around and come the other way. And I really like having that visual line to follow when I'm doing this. I think it makes things a lot easier. But you know what? I've suggested lots of ways to do things. You give them a try. If there's another way that works better for you, by all means. I don't think there's a lot of rules with quilting. The rule is, what do you need to do to get the results that you want? Okay. We'll cut this in half. And I'm going to continue to press to the dark. Make sure my iron stays nice and hot. And this one, press to the dark, and it gives us our two little triangle squares. And then trim away the little dog ears here on the sides. Don't need those, that just gives you bulky seams. And there we have two of those. So to complete this block here, these corner blocks, we're going to sew the square, that and that, together with that. So if I was going to do this at home, I'd just kind of lay that over there and lay that over there. And I would make the whole stack, all of the ones that I needed to do. So I'd have quite a stack here to sew through, just one set at a time. You press that, put that together, voila, you got it. Okay. Next we need to do flying geese for this other part. Let me set those right there. For the next section, you need flying geese. You can go back to video 2, where we talked about flying geese and review, because it's a quick piece method, and that so you can whip them out pretty quickly. You'll need the flying geese for this portion. I'm going to set those off to the side. All right. So how to make this unusual section here? Right now I'm making the outside, not exactly the inner star. I'm working around the outside in. We need a couple of these triangles. So we're going to cut this on the diagonal, just like we did in episode 6, where I talked about cutting different things on the diagonal. And if you want to review that, you can go back there and check that out. We cut it on the diagonal and give us a couple little squares here. And then we need to do the same thing with this one, except we need to cut it twice on the diagonal. And be sure you cut it in a way that is not going to hurt yourself or not going to risk any problems. You don't want to accidentally cut yourself. I actually had a friend who cut off part of her toe because the rotary blade, I don't know, she was cutting on the floor or something like that. Don't do that. Just don't. All right. So there's some more of our triangles that we're going to need. There's our goose. Put the goose in there. And there, and there. And now we need the ones that go right here. And here's another one that we cut. We're going to cut diagonally. Let's grab this one for us. And those are going to fit in there really nice. I think this was a new block for me until I started working on this one. And I think it really does a nice, I think it's really nice. I wouldn't have thought about it, but I think it goes really nicely together. So let's start here with these ones. And again, if you have problems with the corner munching, getting munched by your machine, start with the other edge, if that's going to work better for you. And I'm going to take this one, and I'm just going to put it right there without pressing the other one first. I think that saves me a little bit of time if you can still press it accurately. If you can't press it accurately, don't do it that way. Do however you feel comfortable doing it. Okay, I'm going to come press this. I'm going to press out here. Out nice and smooth. Beautiful. Trim these parts off. And now we're going to add this onto there. But I want to trim it first here real quick. Use this handy little trimmer just to give me a little bit greater accuracy. Move that around so I don't cut at a funny angle. If I cut at a funny angle, I can't see it. I'm just going to make mistakes. I'm trying to avoid making mistakes. All right, so that's going to line up much better. And it eliminates some of the guesswork there. Now, oh yes, I want to point this out here to you. So I have my flying goose on the bottom. And this fabric is light enough that I can, where I'm sitting in my lighting, I can see through and I can see where that X is. But if you can't, another trick is to feel right where that is, and you can kind of get a good feel for it. I could also, if I wanted to, in fact, I think I just will, just so you can see that. I can mark the X. I just wrote along those little grooves where it is and gave myself a good X mark to look at. And that way when I stitch it, it should be just right. Fingers crossed. Let's see. Let's see how I did. Oh, not too bad. Not too bad. Okay. So another way that you could do this too would be to sew it upside down. And by upside down, I mean typically we have the bigger thing, the bigger item larger item on the bottom and we put the smaller one that we're sewing onto it on the top. But you could sew this upside down. You could sew it this way, then you would really see the X that you're trying to look at. There we go. Okay. Now we need to put these guys on, and I think I'm going to trim them as well. I'll just feel a little bit better about that. I've also seen another way to figure out what's kind of going to be the halfway point is to fold the triangle in half. And I've even seen people press it, or at least finger press it, so that you can see the halfway mark to better line up. But I find this way works really well for me. But it gives you some options of things you can try. Okay, and we're going to put these two on, and it'll give us this unit. Now I can line this up. I'm going to use that as a frame of reference. That's going to get clipped off, this part, but that's where I'm lining it up. And I'm going to follow my own advice of wanting to keep that point, so I'm going to do it the opposite way of how we usually sew. Okay, and I have a little bump here where my points are meeting, where stuff's just kind of sticking out. I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to pretend that's not there. Or and I can also, let me just do that. I'm going to trim that tiny bit off. Sometimes that can push the 1/4 inch mark out, depending on what kind of foot you have, and it can cause an additional bump, so you don't keep that accuracy. It is a little trickier because you have that one on the bottom, a little trickier, but that's all right. We can do it. Look at how much we've done so far. All right, so I'm eyeballing here and I'm making sure I go over that X to keep the points. X marking the spot. Okay. All right, let's see how we did here. You know what, I'm going to press this way, I'm going to press towards the dark. Oh, look at that. Ha ha ha, I got it. Just right. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. That worked pretty well for me. I'm going to do it again. And if I had an extra little bump there, I would trim that away. But I also want you to notice here, see how things are just, this portion across here is not a perfectly straight line. It's not. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. If I meet that and I line up with this really well, you know, it might be that my seam allowance is a little bit off there. It's okay. Nobody's going to notice. And if somebody is that picky about your seam allowances, they need to just mind their own business, because these things happen. We're people, they happen. There's so many mistakes that you can make and problems you can come up with when you're doing this. But just don't worry too much about it. Now I know I say that, and some people get really upset and will, you know, say, well, you have to have an accurate 1/4 inch seam. And absolutely, I am 100% in agreement with that. But when it doesn't work, when you don't get it just right, what can you do to fix it? And I think it's important to talk about those things too, because we all make mistakes. And so I kind of adjust and I line up as I go. I also think, again, we're dealing with bias edges. I like to avoid pinning and stretching as much as possible when we're dealing with bias. I think it just it can cause problems dealing with these little triangles. Okay. Little sewing music there. All right. Press towards the dark. Oh, look, another awesome corner. It makes me so happy. Okay, I'm going to trim off this little part here. We're not going to need that. There we go. Oh, this is getting exciting. So here is our center star block. Oh, you know what? And I'm going to trim this, maybe just a little bit of that part as well, little part that's hanging over. I'm not going to necessarily line up the ruler and trim it at this point. I don't want to do that. When I'm joining them all together, if I need to trim it, I will, but I'm not going to worry about that at this point. So here's your center star, just the same as the stars that we've made before. And there's the two edges, two corners here. So we continue to make all that were needed and then continue to join this all together. And that's your center. We'll talk a little bit more about the assembly of the borders and all the things that go around it in our next episode. Be sure to tune in for that one. I've got lots of tips of how you put different things together because you have to do it some unique ways in this beautiful quilt. So be sure to join me. Thanks for tuning in this time, and I'll see you there. This episode of Essex Block of the Month is brought to you by Quilting Treasures. Imagine and create.